1911. I'll tell you a little bit more about this town, an oil town, which has now fallen on hard times. In a little bit, we'll take a little bit of a tour around the place. You can see one of the buildings there lying vacant and dormant. It's a rather sad town, but also one with a glorious past. So we'll have a look around it in a little bit. The reason for being here, of course, is because of what has been happening in Paris over the last few days. Those climate change talks which have been going on, the negotiations, and a global discussion which has been generated by them about the impact of climate change, what it could mean for all of us in the future. Now, Texas, you might call it the belly of the beast, I guess. Oil, fracking, coal. Every now and then on these train tracks just running along here behind me, one of those massive freight trains, hopefully one will come past in a little bit, loaded up with coal, which is being sent to the power stations to make electricity for the United States, for Texas and the other southern states and elsewhere across the grid. So this is a place synonymous with the burning of fossil fuels. Texas, the US state which by far emits the most carbon dioxide of all US states. And yet a little known fact is that it's also suffering from the effects of climate change. And in order to discuss a little bit about that, our first guest here is with me. He's come all the way from the University of Texas in Arlington, and his name is Arne Wingoot, Associate Professor of Environment and Earth Sciences there. Just tell us, you've been researching the scientific evidence here at the moment. What is that telling you about the changing climate?
Yes, so we looked into climate projections from the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and so we project severe heat waves in the future with maximum temperature reaching 52 degrees Celsius, so which is about 5 degrees warmer than extremes in the past. We will experience in the future probably 3 months of temperature above 38 degrees Celsius, whereas currently we have only 1 month of summer temperature above 38 degrees Celsius. And then also we will experience more extreme droughts, but that will be interrupted also with more heavy precipitation and more severe storms, particularly during spring times and situations we have currently in positive El Niño phases, where we have then more higher precipitation here. Currently we have...
Yeah. So higher temperatures, longer spells of drought, more intense rainfall.
Yeah.
We're going to talk to a farmer in a little bit, actually, who's just waiting for us in town to talk to him about the impact that there has been on drought. I mean, I think this week it was announced that Texas has officially, all of Texas has basically left drought, but it's been in drought for a long time. Yeah. We've got one question come in from Alec Nye, who I think is in Australia, asking, what will Texas be like in the future if we don't do anything to mitigate the effects of climate change? Is that a question you can answer?
Well, that is what I pointed out before. So in terms of, we will have likely have mega droughts as projected, and also inferred from past records. And so the past records inferred from tree rings suggested that in the 16th century we had mega droughts not lasting 1 or 2 years, but for longer periods of a decade or so. And so the projection suggests that these longer droughts comparable to the 1950s drought, 2011 drought, or the Dust Bowl in the 30s may reoccur, but with longer phases. Yeah.
Can I ask you a more general question about the Paris climate talks? We'll get back onto Texas specifically in a minute. But a lot of people are wondering, what's the climate impact of having all of these prime ministers and presidents flying into Paris, as some people are putting it, in their private personal jets and driving around in their gas-guzzling limos?
The largest climate impact is actually due to aviation, so flying long distances. The lower impact then by the by the
cars, yeah.
limousines and cars. It could be improved if they, for example, use more sustainable cars and not gas-guzzling limousine. But the question is, what would be the benefit? So if there's a benefit in reducing substantially globally carbon emissions to reduce the trend in climate change, then that would be a benefit which would far outweigh the additional emissions due to the meeting.
So basically, them coming together in the first place is good news if they can come to an agreement.
Yeah, if they come to an agreement.
All right, great. Well, of course, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to you in a few minutes, if I may. But first, I just want to show people around this fascinating town here. So excuse me for a moment.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. I'll be back in a moment. I'm going to wander over this way because Johnny is waiting in the car here. And he is going to drive us off around Electra. I'm going to switch this camera around. There you go, just adjusting itself. But we're now looking out the front. I'm going to climb into the car, try and get the angle right. Bear with me while I just close the door here. So, Johnny.
Hey.
He's English, but looking to all intents and purposes like a Texan with his cap on there. If you could just take us up here and take us to the left. So, Electra. This, well, the story of Electra in many ways is the story of Texas oil. A guy called Daniel Wagoner came here in 1852. He started a ranch, and the railway that we've just been standing beside the tracks of was built through in 1885. That's the Fort Worth to Denver in Colorado railway. And this place started to become a boom town in the early 1900s when one of the Wagoner sons was putting a well down looking for water, because water's pretty scarce here, always has been, and struck oil. And from that moment it became a boom town. At the peak its population was close to 7,000, but it has fallen on hard times since. I mean, you can see some of the buildings here, which, just take my window down, hang on. We're going to take a right into this road here, I think, now, because we've got some pretty glorious buildings. The post office is over there, built in the 1930s. Beautiful example of the architecture of the time. And then we're going to come down here, the old theatres just along the way. The Grand, looking a little less grand these days. But this was really quite a thriving little town built on oil, and now, as I've said, falling on hard times. And why is it falling on hard times? It's falling on hard times because of the oil price collapse. And so in recent years you've just seen the population here dwindle. It's now down at less than 2,000, they believe. The latest census has it just under 3,000, but that was taken quite a while back. And you've just got empty building after empty building. So they've got the happy holiday signs up on the lampposts. And yet, if we just do a U-turn here, because I want to show you a building on the other side of the street, and it'll be easier to do so if we turn right round. I mean, look at this. This is, let me just stop there for a sec. This is just a fantastic old building, part of the municipality here, and yet now boarded up windows, not being used for anything. Really quite sad. Let's drive on. I want to go and meet that farmer I've been talking about. But no, you talk to people here in Electra nowadays, and well, they are quite sad. We're going to go past the local newspaper here, which is a dusty old building called the Star News. There it is. And they're lovely in there, and they talk with pride about their town.
Do you want me to go right here? Straight on.
We're going straight on to find the farmer, aren't we? I think. Yeah, lovely. Thanks. And yet, as you see, there's barely anybody moving around here. Those who do work around here, oh, there's a train coming. We might catch that in the background. That'd be good. Those who do work around here are mostly in what remains of the oil industry, but they are they're pretty strapped for cash in these parts. Right, where am I going to find Trevor Locke? He is a local farmer. He's just here on his cell phone. jump out. Try and show you that train as well. Bit of a distance away, but thanks, Johnny. There you go, there's the train in the background. Let's come over here. I'm going to flip the camera around again. Trevor,
Yes,
hi.
sir.
Thank you for your time.
How are you?
Thanks for coming into town for us. How far away is your farm?
About 7 miles.
Okay, and what sort of farm do you have?
I'm a wheat farmer and a little bit of corn, a lot of cattle.
You got cattle as well?
Yes, sir.
Now, I was talking to a cattle farmer yesterday on the other side of Wichita Falls, so about an hour away, and he was saying he had to get rid of quite a lot of his cattle in the peak of the drought. Was
Yes,
that the
sir.
same for you?
Yes, sir. We got rid of probably 40 to 50% of our cattle herd.
And what happened to your crops at that time as well?
We've had lower than expected crops. We've had less rainfall in the area during the droughts.
Now, I've just been talking to a climate scientist over the other side there who says he's certain that Texas is going to get drier and it's going to have longer periods of drought and then some more intense rainfall. And he's certain that you're going to have more days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, about 37, 38 Celsius. Is that something that farmers are concerned about?
We are. We've changed over to more conservative farming practices. We no-till farm and we do a lot less tillage. So we have more
Tillage?
Yes, sir. Plowing our fields.
Okay.
We're 100% no-till. We don't plow at all. We have
That saves water.
Yes, sir. It saves
Okay.
quite a bit of moisture. It's a better approach for conserving your moisture that you do have.
So your family's been farming that land for what, 100 years or so?
Yes, sir. We've been here over 100 years.
And they will be used in that time to having dealt with drought. They'll have had the Dust Bowl in the 30s.
Yes, sir. And in the 50s and in the 80s. I mean, it's a cyclical problem that we have, but we've learned to work around it and use what we have the best that we can.
So you don't believe that the talk of the hotter days to come means necessarily that you guys will just find it impossible to farm here?
I hope not, but I don't believe that. No, sir. I believe it just a pattern, a weather pattern.
Can I ask? I've talked to quite a lot of people. There's a fantastic guy called Red who lives in this town,
Yes, sir.
who's involved in the oil industry, has been much of his life. And I asked him yesterday about global warming, and he said, we've got too many environmentalists around. He said, this is cyclical. It's Mother Nature that gives us the weather, not human beings. That seems to be sort of quite a solid view amongst a lot of people here.
Yes, sir, it is. And we all feel that way. Well, not all, but I mean, most of us feel that way. We're all used to it. I mean, our families have just been battling these problems for as long as we've been here. And it's a harsher environment right here where we are. We have we do get hotter. We get in the 115, degree ranges in the summer sometimes, and then sometimes we average in the 90s. So it's just a different pattern every year, something we're used to.
And just tell me, as a local man, I mean, we've got these negotiations going on in Paris. What would it mean for a place like Electra? I guess what would it mean for a state like Texas, which has built so much of its wealth on fossil fuels, on oil, on gas, on coal? What would it mean for a place like Texas if there were commitments to say, right, in the coming years, at some point, we will no longer burn fossil fuel?
You'll completely destroy this community.
Someone's calling to agree with you.
Probably so. But no, it's, it will destroy this community. It'll destroy this whole area. Those aren't our beliefs. We don't feel that way. We believe that we've taken the role, and probably y'all as well, that, we set the example for the rest of the world as far as being, the most emission-free, communities. Those things that they've done since the early 2000s they've cost us money. Our equipment costs have went considerably up. Our pickups, a lot of us use older pickups because we still don't have the bugs worked out on as far as getting the equipment to run right.
But you're saying people are trying to cut down on emissions here? Or?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
all our farm equipment is all I guess the tier 4 now.